Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, the familiar smell of motor oil filling his nostrils as he finished working on Mrs. Henderson's sedan. The small auto repair shop had been his sanctuary for the past 3 years, ever since Sarah left him with their 8-year-old daughter Emma. The divorce had been messy, leaving him with custody of Emma and barely enough money to keep the shop running. "Dad, I'm hungry," Emma called from the corner of the shop where she did her homework every afternoon. Her school backpack was covered in patches and her sneakers had seen better days, but her smile could light up the entire garage. "Just give me 5 more minutes." "Sweetheart," Marcus replied, his voice gentle despite his exhaustion. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 6:30 p.m. Another long day, and he still needed to get groceries and help Emma with her math homework. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see a woman in an expensive business suit standing in the doorway. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer heels seemed completely out of place in his humble garage. She looked around with obvious distaste, her nose wrinkling at the sight of the cluttered workspace. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Victoria Sterling. My car broke down about half a mile from here, and I need it fixed immediately." Marcus straightened up, noting the way she spoke to him without even looking directly at him. "What seems to be the problem with your vehicle?" Victoria rolled her eyes. "How would I know? I don't know anything about cars. That's why I'm here, obviously. Can you just go look at it and fix whatever's wrong? I have a very important dinner meeting tonight." "Well, I'd need to see the car first to give you an estimate," Marcus said patiently. "What kind of vehicle is it?" "It's a Mercedes," Victoria said impatiently, checking her expensive watch. "A new one? Probably worth more than this entire establishment." Emma looked up from her homework, sensing the tension in the room. She had become good at reading people's moods, a skill she'd developed during her parents' difficult divorce. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice steady. "I can take a look, but I should mention that I'm closing soon. If it's a complex repair, it might have to wait until tomorrow." Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "Tomorrow? Do you have any idea who I am? I'm the CEO of Sterling Industries. I don't wait for anyone, especially not—" She gestured dismissively at Marcus. "People like you." "People like me," Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yes, people who work with their hands, who clearly don't understand business or urgency. I need this fixed now, not tomorrow. Can't you stay a little later? I'll pay extra." Marcus glanced at Emma, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. He had dealt with difficult customers before, but something about this woman's attitude particularly grated on him. Still, he needed the money. "All right, Ms. Sterling, let me grab my tools and I'll take a look at your car." They walked together to where her silver Mercedes sat on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking. Victoria stood back, arms crossed, while Marcus lifted the hood. "Well," she demanded after barely 30 seconds. "What's wrong with it?" Marcus chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "Ma'am, it's going to take more than half a minute to diagnose the problem. These things take time." "I don't have time," Victoria snapped. "I have investors waiting for me at the most exclusive restaurant in the city. This dinner could make or break a $50 million deal." "Then maybe you should have taken better care of your car," Marcus muttered under his breath. But Victoria heard him. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" Marcus looked up from the engine. "I said maybe you should have taken better care of your car. When's the last time you had it serviced? The oil looks like mud, and I can see several things that should have been addressed months ago." Victoria's face reddened. "I don't have time for car maintenance. That's what warranties are for. That's what people like you are for." "People like me?" Marcus repeated again, standing up to face her. "You keep saying that. What exactly do you mean?" "I mean people whose job it is to fix things when they break. I create jobs, I run a business, I make important decisions that affect hundreds of employees. I don't have time to worry about oil changes and tire rotations." Marcus felt something inside him snap. 3 years of struggling to make ends meet, of being looked down upon, of working 16-hour days while raising his daughter alone, all came bubbling to the surface. "You know what, Ms. Sterling? I bet you couldn't last one day doing what I do. One day of actually working with your hands, solving real problems, taking care of real responsibilities." Victoria laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the evening air. "Are you serious? You think running a little garage is harder than running a multi-million-dollar corporation?" I think you've never had to work for anything in your life, Marcus shot back. I think you've had everything handed to you, and you wouldn't survive one day in the real world. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Victoria looked genuinely shocked. She was used to people backing down, apologizing, scrambling to please her. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone she considered beneath her. Fine, she said suddenly, her voice cold and sharp. You want to make this interesting? Let's make a bet. Marcus raised an eyebrow. A bet? Yes, if I can learn to do your job, really do it, not just pretend in 1 month, then you admit you were wrong about me. And if I can't, she paused, seeming to think. If I can't, then I'll pay to completely renovate your shop and give you enough money to expand your business. Marcus stared at her, wondering if she was serious. And what would I have to do if you win? Victoria smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. If I win, you have to publicly apologize for underestimating me. And you have to admit that running a business is much harder than fixing cars. Emma had followed them outside and was listening to the conversation with fascination. She tugged on her father's sleeve. Dad, she whispered. What if she can't do it and we get money for the shop? Marcus looked down at his daughter, then back at Victoria. The woman was clearly serious, and the potential reward was tempting. His shop did need work, and Emma needed so many things he couldn't afford. You're really serious about this? He asked. Victoria extended her manicured hand. Completely serious. 1 month. Do we have a deal? Against his better judgment, Marcus shook her hand. Deal. Victoria Sterling arrived at Marcus's auto repair shop the next morning at exactly 8 a.m., dressed in what she clearly thought were appropriate work clothes, designer jeans that probably cost more than Marcus made in a week, and a silk blouse that would be ruined within minutes of actual work. She carried a leather briefcase and wore the same confident expression she brought to corporate boardrooms. Marcus was already under the hood of a pickup truck, Emma sitting nearby eating cereal from a plastic bowl. The little girl watched with curious eyes as the fancy lady from yesterday walked into their world again. I'm here, Victoria announced as if her presence was a gift. Where do I start? Marcus slid out from under the hood, wiping his hands on his coveralls. First lesson, you can't work on cars dressed like that. You'll ruin those clothes in 5 minutes. Victoria looked down at her outfit with confusion. What's wrong with what I'm wearing? Everything, Emma piped up cheerfully. Dad has extra coveralls in the back. They might be too big, but they'll keep your fancy clothes safe. Marcus shot his daughter a grateful look. Despite everything, Emma had maintained her kind heart and was trying to help, even though Victoria had been rude to them the day before. Victoria reluctantly accepted the oversized coveralls, struggling to put them on over her designer outfit. The sight of the powerful CEO fumbling with basic work clothes almost made Marcus smile, but he maintained his serious expression. Lesson 1, Marcus began, is understanding that every car is different, but they all have the same basic systems. Engine, transmission, brakes, electrical, cooling, and exhaust. Today we're going to start with the basics, checking oil, brake fluid, and coolant levels. Victoria nodded confidently. That sounds simple enough. Marcus handed her a dipstick. Show me how to check the oil on this Honda. Victoria took the dipstick and immediately tried to force it into the wrong opening. Marcus quickly stopped her before she could cause damage. Wrong hole, he said patiently. That's the transmission fluid dipstick location. But this car doesn't have one. The oil dipstick is over here marked with this yellow handle. Victoria's confidence wavered slightly as she fumbled with the unfamiliar tool. It took her several attempts to properly insert and remove the dipstick, and when she finally did, she held it up triumphantly. There, I did it. Now what does it tell you? Marcus asked. Victoria stared at the metal stick, completely lost. That there's oil in the car? Emma giggled from her corner. Dad, she doesn't know how to read it. Marcus patiently explained the markings on the dipstick, how to determine if the oil level was adequate, and what the color and consistency of the oil revealed about the engine's health. Victoria listened intently, but he could see her frustration growing as she realized how much she didn't know about something most car owners took for granted. By lunchtime, Victoria had managed to check fluids on 3 different vehicles, but it had taken her nearly 4 hours to do what should have been a 30-minute job. Her silk blouse was stained despite the coveralls, her manicured nails were chipped, and her perfectly styled hair was falling out of its neat arrangement. This is harder than it looks, she admitted grudgingly as they sat down for lunch. Marcus had made sandwiches for all three of them, and they ate in the small office area of the shop. Most things are, Marcus replied. That's why people train for years to become skilled mechanics. It's not just about following instructions, you have to develop a feel for it. Learn to listen to what the engine is telling you. Victoria looked skeptical. Listen to the engine? That sounds like nonsense. Emma jumped up excitedly. It's not nonsense. Dad taught me, and now I can tell when Mrs. Peterson's car is having trouble before she even knows it. Want me to show you? Before Victoria could respond, Emma had run outside to where an old station wagon was parked. She opened the hood with practiced ease and gestured for Victoria to join her. Listen, Emma said, starting the engine. Do you hear that knocking sound? That means the engine needs oil, or maybe there's something wrong with the pistons. Victoria listened carefully and slowly began to pick out the irregular rhythm Emma was talking about. I think I hear it, she said, sounding genuinely surprised. Now listen to this one, Emma said, moving to Marcus's own truck. The engine purred smoothly, with only the regular hum of well-maintained machinery. The difference is obvious once you know what to listen for, Marcus explained, joining them, but it takes time to develop that ear. That afternoon, Marcus set Victoria to work on changing air filters, a simple job that required basic hand-eye coordination and following straightforward steps. She struggled with the clips that held the filter housing together, breaking 2 fingernails and muttering under her breath about whoever designed such an impractical system. Why don't they just use screws? She complained after the 3rd attempt to remove a stubborn clip. Because clips are faster once you know how to use them, Marcus explained. A good mechanic can change an air filter in 2 minutes. Screws would take longer and be more likely to strip or get lost. Victoria finally managed to remove the old filter, which was black with dirt and debris. She held it up with disgust. This is revolting. How often are you supposed to change these things? Every 12,000 to 15,000 miles, depending on driving conditions, Marcus said. When's the last time you changed yours? Victoria looked embarrassed. I've never changed mine. I didn't even know cars had air filters. Marcus shook his head but kept his criticism to himself. Instead, he showed her how to properly seat the new filter and secure the housing. It took her 20 minutes to complete the job that should have taken 3. As the day wore on, Victoria's frustration became more evident. She was used to immediate success, to having problems solved by other people, to environments where her authority was unquestioned. Here the cars didn't care about her job title or her bank account. They required patience, skill, and genuine understanding. By 6 p.m., Victoria was exhausted. Her hands were dirty despite wearing gloves, her back ached from bending over engines, and she had a growing appreciation for the physical demands of the job. Same time tomorrow? Marcus asked as she prepared to leave. Victoria hesitated for a moment, and Marcus could see her calculating whether this bet was worth her time and dignity. Then her jaw set with determination. Same time tomorrow, she confirmed. And Marcus, I don't give up easily. After she left, Emma looked up at her father with thoughtful eyes. Dad, I think she's trying really hard even though she doesn't know anything about cars. Marcus nodded slowly. Yes, she is trying. That's more than I expected, to be honest. Do you think she'll learn everything in a month? Marcus looked out the window at Victoria's perfectly repaired Mercedes. He had fixed her cooling system the previous evening after she left. I don't know, sweetheart, but it'll be interesting to find out. 2 weeks into their unusual arrangement, Victoria had established a routine that surprised everyone, including herself. She arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, having discovered that morning traffic was lighter and she could avoid the curious stares of her business associates. Her designer work clothes had been replaced by practical jeans and t-shirts, though she still drove up in her expensive Mercedes, a contrast that never failed to amuse Emma. Marcus had to admit that Victoria was making progress, though not without considerable struggle. Her hands, once soft and manicured, now bore the small cuts and calluses that came with real work. She had learned to change oil, replace spark plugs, and even diagnose some basic electrical problems, though each task took her far longer than it should have. Hand me that wrench, Victoria called out from under Mrs. Chen's sedan, where she was attempting to replace the oil drain plug. Her voice was muffled and she sounded frustrated. Which wrench? Marcus asked, though he knew exactly which one she needed. Part of learning was figuring out the right tool for each job. The The twisty one, Victoria called back, her patience clearly wearing thin. Emma giggled from her homework corner. Dad, I think she means the socket wrench. I know what she means, Marcus replied with a small smile. But she needs to learn the proper names for her tools. Victoria slid out from under the car, her face flushed with effort and streaked with grease. Fine. I need the socket wrench size. She looked at the drain plug helplessly. 15 millimeter, Marcus supplied. Victoria grabbed the correct tool and disappeared back under the car. After several minutes of grunting and the occasional muttered curse word, she emerged victorious, holding up the old drain plug like a trophy. I got it, she announced proudly. Good job, Marcus said, and he meant it. 2 weeks ago, Victoria wouldn't have even known where to look for the drain plug, let alone remove it successfully. What surprised Marcus most was how Victoria interacted with Emma. Despite her initially dismissive attitude, she had begun showing genuine interest in the little girl's activities. She helped with math homework when Marcus was busy with a difficult repair, and she had even brought Emma a new backpack after noticing the worn patches on the old one. Victoria, Emma said during lunch break, why did you decide to learn about cars? Don't you have important business stuff to do? Victoria paused, her sandwich halfway to her mouth. It was a question she had been asking herself more frequently as the days passed. Well, I made a bet with your father, and I don't like to lose. But that's not the real reason, is it? Emma pressed with the directness that only children possessed. Victoria looked uncomfortable for a moment, then sighed. I guess I realized I don't actually know how to do much of anything useful. I can run meetings and make decisions, but I've never actually created anything with my hands. Marcus listened to this exchange while pretending to focus on his paperwork. He was beginning to see a different side of Victoria Sterling, one that her business associates probably never witnessed. That afternoon brought Victoria's biggest challenge yet. A customer brought in a car that wouldn't start, and Marcus decided it was time for Victoria to attempt a full diagnostic. Tell me what you think is wrong, Marcus said, handing her the keys to a 10-year-old Ford that had been towed in that morning. Victoria approached the car with more confidence than she would have shown 2 weeks earlier. She popped the hood, checked the obvious things: oil level, coolant, battery connections. She had learned to be systematic in her approach. Battery looks good, she reported. Fluid levels are okay. Let me try to start it and listen to what it does. She turned the key and the engine cranked but wouldn't catch. Victoria frowned, running through the mental checklist Marcus had taught her. It's getting power because it's cranking, she said, more to herself than to Marcus. So it's either fuel, air, or spark. Marcus nodded approvingly. The fact that she remembered the basic requirements for combustion was progress. Victoria spent the next hour methodically checking each system. She tested the spark plugs, examined the air filter, and even figured out how to check fuel pressure. Marcus watched without offering help, though he was ready to step in if she was about to make a dangerous mistake. Finally, Victoria found the problem: a loose connection in the ignition system that was preventing proper spark delivery to one cylinder. It was exactly the kind of issue that could stump inexperienced mechanics, and she had found it through patient, systematic troubleshooting. I think this connection is loose, she announced, pointing to the offending wire. Marcus examined her work and nodded. That's exactly right. How did you know to look there? Victoria wiped her greasy hands on a rag, looking pleased with herself. The engine was running rough on 3 cylinders instead of 4. I checked the spark plugs and they were all good, so I figured it had to be in the wiring somewhere. Very good reasoning, Marcus said, and he was genuinely impressed. Victoria had shown the kind of logical thinking that made good mechanics, not just people who could follow instructions. Word of Victoria's unusual apprenticeship had begun to spread around the small community. Some customers were initially skeptical about having their cars worked on by someone who was clearly learning, but Victoria's earnest effort and Marcus's careful supervision gradually won them over. Mrs. Henderson, whose sedan Victoria had helped service the previous week, stopped by specifically to thank her. You did a wonderful job with my car, dear, the elderly woman said, and it's so nice to see a successful woman learning practical skills. My generation wasn't encouraged to understand these things. Victoria blushed at the compliment, something Marcus realized he had never seen her do before. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, I'm still learning. But Marcus is a good teacher. That evening, as they cleaned up the shop, Victoria asked a question that caught Marcus off guard. "Do you enjoy this work?" she asked. "I mean really enjoy it, not just do it because you have to?" Marcus paused in his cleaning to consider the question seriously. "Yes, I do. There's something satisfying about diagnosing a problem and fixing it. When someone brings me a car that won't run and I get it running again, that feels good. It's useful work." Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'm beginning to understand that feeling. When I figured out that ignition problem today, it felt different from closing a business deal. More direct somehow. Different how. In business, success is often about convincing people of things or moving numbers around on spreadsheets. But when you fix a car, either it works or it doesn't. There's no ambiguity, no politics. Just the reality of whether you solved the problem." Marcus looked at her with new interest. "That's a very good observation." As Victoria prepared to leave, Emma ran up to her with a drawing she had made during the afternoon. It showed 3 stick figures in a garage, one tall figure labeled Dad, one shorter figure labeled me, and one figure with yellow hair labeled Victoria. "This is us," Emma announced proudly. "We're all working together." Victoria stared at the drawing for a long moment, and Marcus could see something shift in her expression. "Thank you, Emma," she said softly. "This is beautiful. Can I keep it?" Emma beamed with pride. "Of course. I made it for you." As Victoria drove away that night, carefully folding Emma's drawing and placing it on her passenger seat, Marcus found himself wondering what would happen when the month was over. Victoria was learning faster than he had expected, but more importantly, she seemed to be discovering something about herself in the process. 3 weeks into their agreement, Victoria Sterling's transformation had become the talk of the small town. The woman who once wouldn't touch anything that might dirty her manicured nails now arrived each morning, with her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing worn jeans and carrying her own set of basic tools that she had purchased over the weekend. Marcus watched her work on a brake job, noting how her movements had become more confident and economical. She no longer fumbled with simple tools or asked for help with basic procedures. More importantly, she had developed the patience that good mechanics needed, the willingness to work methodically through a problem rather than rushing to a solution. "Dad," Emma whispered, as they watched Victoria carefully remove brake pads, "I think Victoria likes working here." Marcus had noticed it too. Victoria no longer checked her phone constantly or complained about missing important meetings. She seemed genuinely absorbed in whatever task she was performing, approaching each new challenge with the same intensity she had once brought to corporate boardrooms. The breakthrough moment came on a Wednesday morning when Tom Bradley, one of the town's most respected mechanics, stopped by the shop. Tom had 40 years of experience and a reputation for being able to fix anything with wheels. He was also notoriously skeptical of anyone who hadn't earned their knowledge through years of hard work. "Heard you got yourself an apprentice, Marcus," Tom said, eyeing Victoria with obvious doubt. "Some rich lady playing dress-up from what I hear." Victoria stiffened at his words, but instead of responding with the sharp retort Marcus expected, she simply continued working on the transmission she was rebuilding. "She's learning," Marcus said diplomatically. Tom snorted. "Learning? Or pretending to learn until she gets bored and goes back to her fancy office?" Victoria finally looked up from her work, her hands covered in transmission fluid, a streak of grease across her cheek. "Mr. Bradley, isn't it? I've heard about your reputation. Maybe you could help me with something." Tom looked surprised by her respectful tone. "What's the problem?" Victoria pointed to the transmission components spread across her workbench. "This is a manual transmission from a 1995 Honda Civic. The owner says it's been slipping out of third gear. I found what I think is the problem. Worn synchronizers. But I want to make sure I'm not missing anything before I order parts." Tom approached her workbench, clearly intending to prove that she didn't know what she was talking about. But as Victoria walked him through her diagnostic process, explaining exactly how she had narrowed down the problem and why she believed the synchronizers were the culprit, his expression gradually changed from skepticism to grudging respect. "Well," he said finally, "you're right about the synchronizers. But you might also want to check the shift forks while you have it apart. Sometimes they wear at the same time." Victoria nodded eagerly, pulling out a notebook where she had been recording everything she learned. "That makes sense. The wear patterns would be related. Can you show me what to look for? For the next hour, Tom found himself drawn into an impromptu lesson on transmission repair, impressed despite himself by Victoria's genuine curiosity and willingness to learn. When he finally left, he pulled Marcus aside. "I'll be damned," Tom said, shaking his head. "She actually knows what she's talking about. Still thinks she's crazy for wanting to learn this stuff, but she's not just playing around." The real test came later that week when Victoria was faced with her most challenging repair yet. A regular customer, Janet Morrison, brought in her family's minivan with a complex electrical problem that had stumped 2 other shops. "The air conditioning works sometimes, but not always," Janet explained to Victoria, who had become her preferred mechanic after successfully fixing her car's heating system the previous week. "And the radio cuts out when I use the turn signals. 2 different shops told me it would cost more to fix than the van is worth." Victoria looked at Marcus questioningly. Electrical problems were notoriously difficult, often requiring hours of patient troubleshooting to trace faulty wires through a vehicle's complex electrical system. "It's your call," Marcus said. "But electrical diagnostics are advanced level work. Most mechanics with years of experience struggle with intermittent electrical problems." Victoria considered for a moment, then turned to Janet. "I'd like to try, but I want to be honest with you. This might take me a while to figure out, and there's a chance I won't be able to solve it. Are you willing to let me work on it with that understanding?" Janet smiled. "Victoria, you've been straight with me from the beginning and you've done good work. I trust you to give it your best shot." Victoria spent the next 2 days methodically working through the van's electrical system. She studied wiring diagrams, tested circuits with a multimeter, and traced connections throughout the vehicle. Marcus offered guidance when she asked for it, but largely let her work through the problem independently. Emma became Victoria's unofficial assistant, bringing her tools and keeping her company during the long hours of troubleshooting. "Why is this so hard?" Emma asked, watching Victoria test another wire with her multimeter. "Because electricity is invisible," Victoria explained patiently. "I can see when a brake pad is worn or when an engine part is broken. But with electrical problems, I have to use tools to detect what's happening, and I have to understand how all these different systems connect to each other." "Do you like solving hard problems like this?" Victoria paused in her work, considering the question. "You know what? I really do. In my other job, problems are usually about people, convincing them to do things or managing their disagreements. But this is different. This is like being a detective, following clues until you find the answer." On Friday afternoon, Victoria finally found the culprit, a corroded ground wire hidden deep behind the dashboard that was causing intermittent failures in multiple electrical systems. The repair itself took only 20 minutes once she located the problem, but the diagnostic process had required patience, systematic thinking, and genuine understanding of automotive electrical systems. When Janet returned to pick up her van and everything worked perfectly, she insisted on paying Victoria directly rather than going through Marcus. "You earned this," Janet said, pressing the money into Victoria's greasy hands. "You didn't give up when it got difficult, and you figured out something that stumped mechanics with a lot more experience." That evening, as they closed up the shop, Victoria counted the money Janet had given her. $43, less than she typically spent on lunch at high-end restaurants. But as she looked at the bills, Marcus could see something in her expression that he had never seen before during all their weeks together. "This feels different," she said quietly. "Different how?" Victoria struggled to find the words. "In my business, money is just numbers moving around. Profits, losses, investment returns. But this money, I earned this with my hands. I solved a real problem for a real person who needed help. It feels more, I don't know, more real somehow." Emma, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Victoria, are you going to keep working here after the month is over?" Victoria looked startled by the question, as if she had forgotten about their original bet entirely. I don't know, Emma. I haven't really thought about it." But Marcus could see that she was thinking about it now, and her expression suggested that the answer wasn't as obvious as it once would have been. That night, Victoria drove home through the quiet streets of the small town, passing the corporate office building where Sterling Industries occupied 3 floors. The building was dark except for security lights, and Victoria realized she couldn't remember the last time she had worked late or taken a business call home with her. For the first time in her adult life, she was looking forward to going to work the next morning not because of what she might accomplish, but simply because she enjoyed the work itself. The final week of their month-long agreement arrived with an unexpected complication. Victoria's assistant called the shop on Monday morning with an urgent message. The board of directors at Sterling Industries was demanding an emergency meeting to address Victoria's prolonged absence from the office. They're asking questions about the Henderson account, her assistant explained when Victoria called back. Mr. Patterson says there are decisions that can't wait any longer. Victoria stood in the middle of Marcus's shop, still wearing her work coveralls, grease under her fingernails and her hair escaping from its ponytail. 4 weeks ago, such a call would have sent her racing back to the office immediately. Now she found herself reluctant to leave. I have to go handle this, she told Marcus, her voice heavy with frustration, but I'll be back this afternoon. Marcus nodded, though he could see the conflict in her eyes. Do what you need to do. Victoria arrived at Sterling Industries feeling like a stranger in her own building. The marble lobby, the expensive artwork, the perfectly dressed employees, everything that had once felt like natural extensions of her identity, now seemed foreign and artificial. The boardroom was filled with the familiar faces of her executive team, all wearing identical expressions of concern mixed with barely concealed criticism. Victoria, Charles Patterson, her longtime business partner, began without preamble. We need to discuss your recent absence from leadership duties. I haven't been absent, Victoria replied, settling into her chair at the head of the polished conference table. I've been learning new skills. Playing mechanic? From what we understand, said Margaret Wheeler, the company's CFO. While important deals have been delayed and clients have been left waiting for decisions. Victoria felt a flash of her old anger, but it was different now, less sharp, more controlled. What specific issues require my immediate attention? For the next 2 hours, she dealt with the accumulated business of 4 weeks, making decisions, approving contracts, and addressing the concerns that had been building in her absence. It was work she had once found energizing and important, but now it felt strangely hollow. There's something else, Patterson said as the meeting wound down. We've received an offer to acquire the company. The buyers are serious and the price is substantial. Victoria looked up sharply. You want to sell Sterling Industries? We want to consider it, Patterson replied carefully. It would mean significant returns for all the shareholders, including you. Enough money that you'd never need to work again, if that's what you're after. The offer was indeed substantial. Enough money to secure Emma's future, to ensure Marcus never had to worry about keeping his shop running, to provide financial security beyond anything Victoria had previously imagined. It was the kind of opportunity that most CEOs would accept without hesitation. I need time to think about it, Victoria said finally. Time? Patterson looked incredulous. Victoria, this is a limited time offer. They need an answer by the end of the week. Then they'll have an answer by the end of the week, Victoria replied, standing up. But I'm not making this decision in a conference room. I need to finish what I started. When Victoria returned to the shop that afternoon, she found Marcus teaching Emma how to check tire pressure, while a customer waited patiently nearby. The scene struck her as beautifully simple compared to the corporate maneuvering she had just left behind. How did it go? Marcus asked when he saw her troubled expression. Complicated, Victoria replied, then forced a smile for Emma. What are you learning today, sweetheart? Dad's teaching me about tire safety, Emma said proudly. Did you know that most people drive around with the wrong tire pressure and don't even know it? I didn't know that, Victoria said, genuinely interested despite her distracted state of mind. Show me what you learned. As Emma demonstrated the proper use of a tire pressure gauge, Victoria found herself thinking about the contrast between this moment and her morning in the boardroom. Here, the knowledge being shared was practical and immediately useful. Emma would carry this skill with her for life, using it to keep herself and others safe on the road. That evening, after the shop closed and Emma had finished her homework, Victoria finally told Marcus about the buyout offer. That's a lot of money, Marcus said quietly, and Victoria could see him calculating what such an amount could mean for his own small family. It is, Victoria agreed, enough that I could do anything I wanted with the rest of my life, including working in an auto repair shop. Victoria looked at him sharply, surprised by the question. You think I'd want to do that? Marcus shrugged. A month ago, I would have said absolutely not. But you've changed, Victoria. The question is, do you realize how much? That night, Victoria sat in her expensive apartment, surrounded by the trappings of her successful career, awards on the walls, expensive furniture, a view of the city skyline that had once filled her with pride. But instead of admiring these symbols of her achievement, she found herself thinking about the satisfaction she had felt when Janet's minivan started perfectly after she repaired the electrical problem. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, looking at the names of business associates, clients, and competitors who made up her professional world. Then she thought about the people she had met at Marcus's shop, customers who trusted her with their vehicles, fellow mechanics who had accepted her despite her unusual background, and Emma, who had somehow become an important part of her daily routine. The next morning brought Victoria's final test as a mechanic. Marcus had arranged for her to work independently on a complete engine rebuild, a 1998 Toyota Camry whose owner couldn't afford to take it to a dealership but needed reliable transportation for work. This is graduate-level work, Marcus explained as Victoria examined the disassembled engine components spread across multiple workbenches. If you can successfully rebuild this engine so that it runs properly and reliably, then you'll have proven that you really can do this job. Victoria nodded, feeling the weight of the challenge. An engine rebuild required not just technical knowledge but also precision, patience, and the ability to visualize how dozens of components work together as an integrated system. She began by carefully cleaning each component, inspecting them for wear and damage and determining which parts needed replacement. It was methodical work that couldn't be rushed, and Victoria found herself falling into the focused state of mind that she had learned to associate with her best work. Emma appointed herself as Victoria's assistant, organizing parts and keeping track of the step-by-step process in a notebook that Victoria had started keeping. "Why do you write everything down?" Emma asked as Victoria made detailed notes about each component's condition. "Because rebuilding an engine is like putting together a very complicated puzzle," Victoria explained. "If I don't keep track of how everything fits together, I might make a mistake when I reassemble it. And if I make a mistake, the engine won't work properly, and Mr. Williams won't have reliable transportation." As the day progressed, Victoria found herself completely absorbed in the work. The corporate buyout offer, the board meeting, even the approaching deadline of their bet. All of it faded into the background as she focused on the precise task of rebuilding an engine that someone was depending on. Marcus watched from a distance, intervening only when Victoria asked specific questions or needed guidance on particularly complex procedures. He was impressed by her methodical approach and attention to detail, but more than that, he was struck by how natural she looked doing this work. The woman who had once seemed so out of place in his humble shop now moved with the confidence and competence of a skilled mechanic. By evening, Victoria had completed the rebuild and was ready for the moment of truth, starting the engine to see if it would run. Emma stood beside her, practically vibrating with excitement, while Marcus watched with professional interest. Victoria turned the key, and the engine caught immediately, settling into a smooth, steady idle that spoke of precision workmanship. "You did it!" Emma shouted, throwing her arms around Victoria's waist. "It sounds perfect." Victoria stood listening to the engine run, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction that was different from anything she had experienced in the corporate world. This wasn't about profit margins or market share. It was about taking something broken and making it work again. About providing a practical solution to someone's real problem. "So," Marcus said quietly, "what's your verdict? Can you do this job?" Victoria looked at him, then at Emma, then back at the engine she had just brought back to life. "Yes," she said simply, "I can do this job." But even as she spoke the words, Victoria knew that proving she could do the work was no longer the most important question. The real question was what she wanted to do with the rest of her life, and the answer was becoming clearer with each passing hour. The final day of their month-long bet arrived with unusual tension in the air. Victoria arrived at the shop early, but instead of immediately getting to work, she sat in her car for several minutes staring at the building that had become unexpectedly important to her. Marcus was already inside, preparing for what they both knew would be their last day working together, under the terms of their original agreement. Emma was unusually quiet, sensing that something significant was about to change. "So, Marcus said when Victoria finally came inside. "I suppose we should talk about the bet." Victoria nodded slowly. "I proved I can do the work. The engine rebuild yesterday was successful, and even Tom Bradley admits I know what I'm talking about. By the terms of our agreement, I've won." "You have," Marcus agreed. "You've learned more in 4 weeks than I thought possible. You've earned the right to that public apology." Victoria looked around the shop, at the tools she had learned to use, the workbenches where she had struggled with her first repairs, the corner where Emma did her homework while they worked. "Actually, Marcus, I don't want an apology." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" Before Victoria could answer, her phone rang. It was Charles Patterson from Sterling Industries, calling about the buyout offer that required an answer by the end of the business day. "I'll take it outside," Victoria said, but Marcus stopped her. "Take it here," he said quietly. "Whatever you're going to decide, Emma and I are part of it now." Victoria answered the call, putting it on speaker so Marcus and Emma could hear. "Victoria, we need your decision." Patterson's voice filled the shop. "This offer won't wait any longer." "I've made my decision, Charles," Victoria said, her voice steady and certain. "I'm not selling." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. "Victoria, are you sure you understand what you're turning down? This is generational wealth we're talking about." "I understand exactly what I'm turning down," Victoria replied. "And I understand exactly what I'd be gaining. I'm keeping the company, but I'm making some changes." Over the next 20 minutes, Victoria outlined her new vision for Sterling Industries. She would step back from day-to-day operations, promoting Charles Patterson to CEO, while she remained as chairman of the board. The company would establish a new division focused on practical education, programs that taught real-world skills to people who wanted to learn useful trades. "You want to turn a Fortune 500 company into a trade school?" Patterson asked incredulously. "I want to turn part of a Fortune 500 company into something that actually helps people learn skills they can use," Victoria corrected. "We'll start with automotive programs, but expand into other trades: plumbing, electrical work, carpentry. There's a huge need for skilled workers, and there are a lot of people who would benefit from this kind of training." When she finally ended the call, Emma looked up from her coloring book with wide eyes. "Does that mean you're staying?" Victoria knelt down to Emma's level. "It means I'm staying in town, but I don't know if your dad wants me to keep working here." Marcus had been unusually quiet during Victoria's phone call, and now he studied her face carefully. "Is this what you really want? Or are you just running away from something you don't want to face?" "A month ago I would have been running away," Victoria admitted. "But now, Marcus, I've discovered something I never knew about myself. I like solving real problems with my hands. I like work that has a clear purpose. And I like the person I am when I'm doing this work." "What about your old life? The boardrooms, the power lunches, the corporate success?" Victoria considered the question seriously. "I was good at that life, but I wasn't happy. I thought success meant accumulating wealth and power. But it turns out that what makes me happy is much simpler than that." Marcus walked over to his desk and pulled out a legal document that Victoria recognized, the papers for their original bet. "According to this, you've won," he said, holding up the document. "You proved you could learn to do my job. I owe you an apology and an admission that I was wrong about you." "And according to this," Victoria said, producing her own copy of their agreement, "if I won, you had to publicly admit that running a business is harder than fixing cars. But Marcus, I've learned something over the past month. They're both hard in different ways, and they're both important." Marcus smiled and tore up the betting agreement. "So what happens now?" Victoria took a deep breath. "Now I'd like to make you a different kind of offer. I want to buy into this shop as a partner. Not to change what you've built, but to help you expand it. We could offer training programs for people who want to learn automotive repair. We could hire more mechanics and serve more customers. And we could do it without losing what makes this place special." "What makes this place special?" Marcus asked. Victoria looked around the shop again, then at Emma, who was watching their conversation with intense interest. "This place is special because it's real," Victoria said. "People bring you problems and you solve them. You do honest work for honest pay. You've built something that helps your community. And you've raised your daughter to understand the value of useful skills and hard work. I want to be part of that." Emma suddenly jumped up from her chair. "Does this mean Victoria's going to be here every day? Like forever?" Victoria laughed, the first truly carefree laugh Marcus had heard from her. If your dad will have me, yes. I'd like to be here every day. Marcus extended his hand to Victoria. Partners? Partners, Victoria agreed, shaking his hand. 6 months later, Sterling Auto Repair had expanded into the building next door and was offering automotive training programs to students from across the region. Victoria had proven to be as good at teaching as she was at learning, and her corporate experience helped them manage the business side of their growth effectively. Emma had appointed herself as the shop's official greeter, and her homework corner had been expanded into a proper study area for students taking evening classes. One evening, as they were closing up the shop after a particularly busy day, Emma asked the question that had been building in everyone's mind for weeks. Dad, do you like Victoria more than just as a work partner? Marcus glanced at Victoria, who was pretending to be absorbed in organizing tools while clearly listening to every word. Emma, Marcus said carefully, sometimes when you work closely with someone and respect them and enjoy their company, feelings can develop that go beyond just being business partners. Do you mean like love feelings? Emma pressed with her characteristic directness. Victoria finally looked up from the tools, her cheek slightly pink. Emma, your dad and I are still figuring out our relationship. We started as people who didn't like each other very much, then we became teacher and student, then business partners. Now we're figuring out what comes next. Emma considered this seriously, then nodded with satisfaction. Good. Because I think you should get married, and then Victoria could be my stepmom and she could live with us and help me with my math homework every night. Marcus and Victoria looked at each other across the shop, both laughing at Emma's matter-of-fact assessment of their romantic future. Well, Marcus said, walking over to where Victoria stood. When you put it like that, Victoria smiled up at him. I think Emma might be the smartest one among us. As Marcus leaned down to kiss Victoria for the first time, Emma cheered from her corner. Does this mean we're going to be a real family? She asked. Victoria broke away from Marcus's kiss long enough to answer. We already are a real family, sweetheart. We just needed time to figure it out. Outside, the small town settled into evening quiet, and the sign on Sterling Auto Repair flickered on, advertising honest work, fair prices, and the kind of success that couldn't be measured in stock prices or quarterly reports. The success of people who had found their place in the world and the people they wanted to share it with.